आप सबका स्वागत करता हूं। मुझे बड़ी प्रसन्नता है कि मैं राहुल जी के साथ ये आपके सामने वक्तव्य दे रहा हूं, एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर कि किस प्रकार से मूर्ति पूजा का प्रारंभ देश में होता है और वैदिक देवी देवताओं की परिकल्पना और यज्ञ तो था ही, लेकिन किस प्रकार से अब मूर्ति उनकी बनती है। So I'll begin with a Mangalacharan, a happy beginning, a Mangal beginning, and I quote from Acharya Abhinav Gupta, and I will do that. I will start the Mangalacharan. Yastanmayad Hridaya Samvadana Kramena Drakchitra Shakti Gana Bhumi Vibhag Bhagi हर्षोल्लसत पर विकार जुषः करोति वंदे तमाम तमहमेन्दु कलावतंसम। तो ये भगवान शंकर की उपासना है। वी आर थिंकिंग ऑफ शिवा who creates this whole world, who creates the male part, the female part, and who provides us immense pleasure and joy in creating that whole drama of this world. Now, why have I chosen this subject, origin of Murti Puja? You see, since 19th century, in India, we have been kind of stuck in a debate. The debate is this, that the Vedas, that is the Samhitas, did not have, at the time of Yajna and at the time of that particular way of worship or upasana, they did not have what has been called by the West as idol worship or Murti Puja, as we call it in Hindi now, or as we used to call it once upon a time, making a Vigraha. Vigraha is a body. So, worshipping the divine in a body. Body means body of all kinds. So this debate has been there since 19th century. Now, of course, India is a land in which people have worshipped the divine in various ways and as part of various darshanas or various philosophical systems. Some have worshipped through yajna, some have worshipped through following the message of certain philosophical leaders. There is a verse written around 12th century, and that verse talks about the different systems which were used in India by different people. And the verse goes on like this. It's very important. Yam Shaiva Samupasate Shiva iti. Yam Shaiva Samupasate Shiva iti. Brahmeti Vedantino. Bauddha Buddha iti Pramana Patavaha. Karateti Nayyayakaha. Arahan Nityath Jain Shasana Rato. Arhan Nityath Jain Shasana Rato. Karameti me mamsaka soyam wo vidadhatu vanchita phalam trailokya natho hari. So the meaning of this verse is that the Lord of this three world, Trailokya Natha, who is also called Hari, Trailokya Natho Hari, आपको वांछित फल दे. He may fulfill all your desires. Now, who is this Hari? He says that Hari is the same as Shiva. The Shaivas call him Shiva. Yam Shaiva Samupasate Shiva iti. And the Brahmavadis call him Brahma. Brahmeti Vedantino. The Buddhas call him Buddha. Hari is called Buddha by the Bodhas or followers of Buddha, Bauddha, iti pramana patava, and those who are very expert in logic, they call him Karata. The logicians called him Karta, the doer. Karteti nayyayaka. Arahan nityath jaina shasana rato. Those who follow the discipline of Jain Munis, they call him Arahan. So Arahan is Hari, Buddha is Hari, Brahma is a Hari, Shiva is a Hari. Arahan nityath Jaina shasana rato. Karameti mimamsaka. And the followers of Mimamsak Darshan, the followers of Yagya, the Vedic Yagya, they call him Karma or they call him Yagya. Yagya itself is the divine. Karmeti Mimamsaka. Soyam vo vidadhatu vanchita phalam trailokya natho Hari. So this Hari may fulfill all your desires, and this Hari is Buddha, this Hari is Karma, and so on, which I explain. So in India, there has been this thought that the divine manifests itself in different ways to different people, and they pursue different kinds of approaches. Now, this was the Indian way till 19th century, when the British came and became our rulers, especially after 1857, when Victoria, Malka Victoria, she became the Empress of India, and India became the jewel in the British crown. At that time, there was a heavy influence of European thought and particularly Christianity. And so, under the impact of the intimidation of monotheism, so many Indians in the 19th century, or as a matter of fact, even towards the end of the 18th century, they started feeling guilty about worship of murtis, about worship of idols, because the Christians were constantly castigating it, calling it devil worship, calling it not the right way to God. So there were various systems in India which reacted to this, and they said, oh, we also follow monotheism. We also worship formless God. So somebody like Dayanand Saraswati said, there is no murti in the Vedas. So worship of Yagya is the true system. There is no other system which is true. Then, other than the Arya Samajis, the Brahmo Samajis said, no, Brahmo is the real reality. Upanishads are the true granthas. They are the real granthas. The rest are not so real, but Upanishads are the best. Then there were Dev Samajis. Then there were other people who were all influenced and intimidated by Christianity. And people started saying in India that this particular approach is the best, that worshipping God without form is the best, that Nirgun is higher than Sagun. Now, all this begins in the 19th century because Hindus got so badly intimidated that Christianity made them guilty of so many of their systems. For all these thousands of years, right since the Vedic times, they had been worshipping in diversity. Ruchinam vaichitryat riju kutil nana patha jusham nirnam eko gamyaha. As Pushpadanta said in his poetry, that there are various paths, straight and a little diverse, but people arrive at the same goal by diverse modes of worship. So we were very proudly believing that. Tulsidas said that aguna saguna nahi kachu bheda. We were very much reconciled to the diversity of our paths. But in the 19th century, this came. Now, with this debate, people started debating, when did Murti Puja arise? Because in Veda, there is no Murti Puja. There is no worship of the Devata in a form of stone or a form of wood or any other kind of what is called Vigraha or body, or in Greek it was called idolon, from which you have the English word idol, and from which you have the Greek word icona or icona, which means the icon. So, when did icon arise? And in all this questioning and in all this investigation, there was this guilt feeling that the pure times were the Vedic times when we worshipped one God, and all devatas are equally actually one God. And we somehow slided down into worship of the Murti. So people started thinking about this. Now, in my talk, I want to make it very clear that emergence of Murti Puja or Vigraha or worship of Vigraha should not be considered at all as something inferior or as a lower mode of worship. Now, this is a very commonplace thinking in modern India. And so many of our great modern stalwarts, especially the Advaitavadis, they, not all of them, but quite a few of them, tend to fall into this kind of a logic that Murti Puja, Saguna worship is a lower form, or that it is a form which is only meant to lead you to the higher level. Now, this in itself is not according to tradition. Because in the Indian system, the creator, in all Indian philosophy, the creator and the creation are not two. The creation is an attribute, a manifestation, and as much real as the creator. So it is not like the Christian God who created the world and the world was something different from him. And the world eventually also ended up having a devil who was constantly fighting or was in constant opposition to God. In the Indian system, creation or Srishti is not different from Srishta. Prakriti is not different from Purusha. They are together. As Kalidas said, Vagartha viva sampriktau. They, like word and its meaning, the two are inseparable. They manifest as two, but actually they are one. So, Murti Puja or Vigraha worship was just another diversity, just another choice which emerged from the Vedic worship. Now, anybody will tell you that in the Vedic Samhitas, in the Rig Samhita, which is the main Samhita, the main textual body, there are so many gods like Indra, Pushan, Usha, etc., etc., so many of them. And they all have certain attributes. They are all described as people. They are all described as having shape, size, color, preferences, food which they prefer, etc., etc. So they are described as having their so called bodies as something which is not without form. They are not formless. The Vedic Devatas have a form. I am not going into this debate that this form was later on imposed or this is a lower form. You see, all this is just Christian intimidation. In Indian thought, the form, the matter, is part of creation, it is part of Prakriti, and it is as divine as the Purush or the creator. So all the Devatas, they have a shape and a size, and they are all holy. Pavakana Saraswati. So Saraswati also has an attribute. She is also called Indrani, Pahva Utaye. So she is also called Indrani. She is also a river, a real flowing river. She is also a Devi. So all these things are together. They are not inseparable. They are not higher or lower. Similarly, the Devatas have a huge diversity. And these Devatas were given offerings in fire, and it was through the mouth of fire that they accepted the offerings. Now, how is it that the transition takes place? Where do we find an evidence of this? I'm not going into various theories that keep cropping up, or that there have been so many theories as to why Murti Puja was invented. I'm quote unquote invented. No, I am not going into all those theories. I am going to give you an evidence, a praman, an actual account of the transition that took place. And how did this transition took place? And is there any textual evidence for this? Now we know very well that when this great transition took place, then there were so many texts called the Agamas, which described as to how one should perform worship. But that is the later stage. I am going to talk to you about the actual conception and how things happen. Now, this is something which is to be found in the Natya Shastra. In the fourth chapter of the Natya Shastra, we have an account of how this transition took place. At this point, let me very briefly tell you what is the relationship of Natya Shastra to the Vedas. Now, it is said that the Natya Shastra was the method of providing the message of the Vedas to the common people. Or not just the message, but the real knowledge. The full, complete knowledge of the Vedas had to be given to the common man, to the man and the woman and the child, yes, the children also, who could not be formally educated through the long process of learning the Vedas, understanding the mantras, understanding the deep knowledge behind that. So, Natya Shastra, on the request of Indra, was given to Bharata Muni by Brahma. How did this happen? The story goes that Indra said that, look, we have a lot of ignorance in this world now, so kindly provide me with a plaything, a sport, or something to entertain me. The word is kridaniya, kridaniya kamichhamo, yat shravyam cha drishyam bhavet. I need some plaything, and which should also give the message of the Vedas to the common people, to everybody, those who do not have an opportunity to go for higher education. So Brahma said, okay, fine, I'm going to give you Natya Veda. And this would be the fifth Veda, which would contain all the knowledge, all the truth, and all the depth of understanding about creation and divine and creator. Everything would be provided to you, and how to live, how not to live, all methods of good life and dharma would be provided to you through this Natya Ved. And this Natya Ved in practice is an art of drama, which is unique because, unlike all other arts, in drama, you see something and you hear something at the same time. In painting, you only see, in music, you only hear, in sculpture, you only see, and maybe touch, but in theater, you see and hear. So it was a unique art, and it had the capacity to provide all the dharmic knowledge of the Vedas. That's why it was called the fifth Veda. Now, this knowledge was given, theater was started, plays were invented, and some plays were done by Bharat Muni in the beginning, particularly the story of Amrit Manthan. That is when there was churning of the ocean, and in which Amrita or nectar emerged, and in which poison also emerged. And after an enactment was done of this, and after this enactment was appreciated by different people and the gods as well, the creator of Natya, Brahma, and the producer of Natya, Bharat Muni, they all went to Shiva, Bhagavan Shankar, to show their achievement. Now, it is here that the topic on which I am addressing you begins. So, when they had made a performance before Shiva, and Shiva had appreciated this performance, then Shiva, after congratulating both Bharat Muni and Brahma, he said, "Look, there is something which is missing. You have performed the play, you have performed a prolegomena, or what is called the Purvaranga. Prolegomena is called Purvaranga in Sanskrit and in the technical term of theater. In this Purvarang, there is a lack of something called dance or nritta. Nritta is something which is lacking here. It is something which is extremely significant and attractive. And it is expression of great joy. And it is immortal. And Shiva says, Mayapidam smritam nrittam sandhya kaleshu nrityata nana karan samyuktair angaharair vibhushitam. So Shiva says that, look, I also at the evening hour remembered that there was something called dance or dancing, and I started dancing. Now, when he uses the word remembered, smritam, maya api idam smritam, then by the word smritam, it indicates I remember. You remember something which has already existed. So, dance is immortal. It is as old as creation. And Shiva remembers and started dancing. And he danced, which had all kinds of embellishments called Karana and Angahara, etc., etc. And he said that, look, you should put this in the Purvaranga. Purvaranga means prologue, not prologue, but a prolegomena or an introduction to main play. That before the main play, the main theatrical expression starts on the stage, there is something done in order to calm and soothe the minds of the audience so that they get focused on what is happening on the stage. That is called Purvaranga. And Shiva told Bharat Muni that, yes, Bharat Muni, you have performed a Purvaranga also, but it does not have dance. So now please introduce dance. And I am going to call my disciple Tandu, who is going to show you what is Nritta or what is dance, which has all kinds of Karanas and Angaharas, etc. in it. Very significant. Karanas are 108 postures, which were for hundreds of years resculpted in various temples of India and even outside India in Cambodia, etc. So they were considered as divine. And he said, Shiva said, that Tandu will show you all what this Nritta is. So he calls Tandu. He says that Achakshva Bharataya Angahara Prayoga. He says, teach him dance, and all this dance is taught by Tandu. Now, when Shiva was dancing, Parvati was also inspired to join him, and what she danced was a soft version of what Shiva was dancing, and that was called Lasya. Now, all this was done, this dance, this Nritta, not Nritya. Nritya is a later form, which means that when dance has an element of abhinaya or enactment of a character in it, then it is called Nritya. But this is Nritta, that is dancing without portrayal of a character, dancing out of the sheer joy of moving your body. That is Nritta, Nrittam. And this is introduced as an essential item, or rather as an essential force in the Purvarang by Shiva. So, what is now for our purpose today, the purpose of recalling the origin of Murti Puja, so important in dance? You see, this dance had various movements of the body. It has movements of the legs, it has movements of the belly, it has movements of the neck, and these movements were called Rechaka. It had movements of several kinds of postures that the body takes, that legs are placed in a manner and hands are placed in a manner, and different movements are done. Hands are held with certain ways which talk about an expression. Now, all this is done in order to make dance very significant. But other than these Rechakas, Angaharas, and Karanas which become Angaharas, there was something else which had to be done. And this thing was called Pindi Bandhas. Now, I'm sure you have understood very clearly that various movements of the bodies in dance are seen by people as movements of the parts of the body. That movements of the hand, movement of the feet, holding feet and hand in certain combination in various ways in order to create great diversity. So that is all dance itself. But here something else is introduced. And what is that? That is called Pindi Bandhas. So Pindi Bandhas were also taught by to Bharat Muni. And what are those Pindi Bandhas? While dancing, the dancer took certain postures. Pindi bandhans tato drishtva nandi bhadra mukha ganah chakruste nam pindi nam bandham asam salakshanam. Now, while the dance was being performed and all these movements of hand and feet were done, there was something else being done, and that was called Pindi Bandhas. And what was the Pindi Bandhas which the disciples of Shiva, the Nandi and Bhadramukha and the other Ganas saw? What is this Pindi Bandha and what is the meaning of Pindi Bandha? Now, Pind means the body. So, a lump or a body or a segregation of a matter or a segregation of houses is called Pind. The word is still in use, in very common use also. In Punjabi, you call a village a Pind. Okay, because it is a collection of something. So here it is a collection of what? This Pindi is getting into a combination with what other things? There is a bandha of what else? It is actually certain attributes and positions and postures of certain devatas which form the Pindi bandhas. In other words, when a particular devata, let us say Indra, when Indra is made to descend into your body, when Indra with his attributes like a bright face, like carrying the weapon called Vajra, like riding the elephant, white elephant called Airavat, when a dancer is able to show through gestures, through the bodily postures, the shape, the quality of Indra, then that is called the Pindi of Indra. I hope I am clear. So it is through the human body, the dancing body, that first of all, there is a descent, or you may even use the word incarnation, because incarnation means getting into the body, becoming the body, and sarcosis. So, when a particular devata, when a particular god, goddess, in Sanskrit we only use the word devata for both. When a particular god or goddess is given a shape by a dancer, then that is called Pindi Bandha. So, in this dance, which was taught to Bharat Muni by Tandu at the instance of Shiva, apart from the things that we know, the bodily movements, angaharas, etc., all these things, apart from that, what is important here is the idea of Pindi Bandha. The Pindi of the Devata becomes enacted. Right? Now, once you have brought in the Pindi of the Vedic Devatas, then what have you done? From the Devatas which through the mantras were described to you in words only, In the mantras, there was a verbal picture of the devatas. Now, that verbal picture of the devatas is given shape by the dancer in the human body by the a formation of pindi bandhas. So, if there is the pindi of Chandika, then that pindi called Singha Vahini of the Chandika will depict the Chandika, the Devi, who would be riding on the Singha, who would be carrying different kinds of weapons, who would have a face, a very well lit, full of light face, as is appropriate for a goddess. If you are depicting Indra, then Indra would be depicted along with his Ayudha Vajra and his Vahan or vehicle, which is Garuna. If you want to depict Vishnu, then you would enact a pindi called Takshi, and Vishnu would be depicted there through various weapons. And Vishnu also, as you know, rides on the Garuna. Indra rides on Airavat, the elephant. Brahma, if you want to depict, then Brahma is shown as seated in the lotus. Similarly, Kamadev is shown as riding or standing on a fish or jhasha. So, all these were depicted as part of dance. And they were depicted in the Purvaranga. Now, the Natshas goes on to describe in detail as to what should be the appropriate place in which these pindis were to be done. It goes on to describe as to who will do it, at what time it would do it, how many female dancers would enact this, what would be their number, in what sequence they would do it. All this is a very complicated system which is explained. All this was done as part of certain songs. These songs were called Dhruva songs. Now, here I want to put before you the Vedic connection. I mean, why do I say that these things have a Vedic origin? Somebody can just come around and say, well, these are very late developments. They are to be found in Puranas only because these gods and goddesses are mentioned there. So why do you say that the Natya Shastra has a Vedic connection? It could be a very late development in the field of theater. And why should we believe that it is connected to the Vedic period? Now, the reason I want to draw your attention to the Vedic connection is this. You see, in the Vedic times, when Yajna was performed, and you know, Yajna was a very elaborate thing, then at moments or for certain periods of time, like an hour or 2 or 3 or whatever was the timetable, when the Yajna stopped for a while, there were many other activities going on. And one of the major activity at that time was singing of certain songs which were called dhruvas. Now these dhruvas were sung and they were of two categories called Saptarupa Gitakas. And there were 7 types of Saptarupa Gitakas: Mandarak, Aparantak, Ullopya, Prakari, Ovenak, Rovindak, and Uttara. Now, these were songs which were sung by a special class of people. And very often, these people had an association with the worship of Shiva, who is the Vedic Rudra also. These songs were sung, and these songs were sung as part of the Vedic ritual. They were not exact parts of the yajna, not part of Samgan. They were not part of Rig part or Yajur part, but they were performed along with the yajna, and they were essential. They had to be performed. These were the 7 types of Gitakas. Then there were other 7 types of Gitas called Chandak, Asarit, Vardhamanak, Panik, Rik, Gatha, and Sam. This is different from the Samgan, the 7-note Samgan. So these 7 Gitakas are very clearly mentioned in the Natya Shastra as part of the Purvarang. All of them, as a matter of fact, all 14 of them have a place in the Natya Shastra. And it shows that Purvarang, the precursor to the actual performance, was an essential part of performance of drama. And it was an essential ritual part, a spiritual part. And it is in this spiritual part that the Pindi Bandhas are performed. So the Natya Shastra in the 4th chapter gives a very clear account as to how, when the Asarita Gita or the Vardhamanaka Gita is sung, then it is at that time the Pindi Bandhas are performed. They were, of course, performed when other Gitas were also held. To sum up, what I'm trying to draw your attention to is this, that in the Vedic tradition, along with the yajna proper, there was singing of these songs called dhruvas. And dhruvas were very essential in various ways to the Natya Shastra and to all performing traditions. They were very essential throughout the history of music and dance in India. Until 400 or 500 years ago, we also had the Brij Bhasha Dhruva Pada. So this Dhruva, singing of Dhruvas from very ancient times to the modern times, has continued as a sacred activity. Coming back to what was done at the time of Vedic ritual, these Gitas were sung, and these Gitas, the 7 Gitakas and the 7 Gitas, the Dhruvas, they found a place in theater in which the Pindi Bandhas were performed. So, formation of Pindi Bandha is actually formation of the Vigraha, the icon in the human body. So, what you find is that the Vedic Devata, who was worshipped in the yajna as only Vakamurti, as something described through mantras, and who was given all kinds of offerings, treated as a force, as a person, but described only through words, is now given a shape and size, or an icon, or a vigraha. Vigraha means a body. The idol of the in a temple is also called vigraha. It is given a vigraha on the stage, and this is the earliest record of the transition that actually happened. Now, this is part of the Natya Shastra. Natya Shastra is a very ancient text. The present recensions of Natya Shastra that we find, they easily date back to 5th century BC. And we know that there were even earlier editions of this Natya Shastra, which were twice as big, and they were much, much older. The text of Natya Shastra shows extreme closeness with all Vedic rituals and how theater was part of the later development of Vedic activity, in which you find emergence of Pindi Bandhas, and Pindi Bandha is on stage the incarnation of Devata. Now, once this has happened on stage, you can create the same Vigraha in any other material. You can do it in wood, you can do it in stone, you can do it in mud, you can do it in whatever material you find. And it is this evidence which I think is most crucial to the development of Murti Puja in India. And it is here that we find a textual recording of it. So, thank you very much.
I am a student of journalism and I really love history also. So I wanted to ask a doubt, sir.
Yes,
May I?
yes. Good.
You said that when the through the Natya Shastra they started this nrittams with which the depictions of gods and goddesses started, no, sir.
Yeah.
So, do you think that it is because of that necessity to depict the gods or goddesses in physical forms arose, which led to the Murti Puja? I didn't understand that connection.
Yes, yes, that's it. You see, because the gods were sacred, because they were already being worshipped in the Vedic ritual, there was a diversity created to make them more visible, approachable, and to see their manifestation as a physical body, something which we can see, something which we can worship, something which we can keep, something for which we can make a temple.
Thank you so much for the beautiful explanation. It was a great experience. I'm a musician staying in the city of Nashik.
Very good.
And I would like to know about the Drupad Gan that we have today.
Yeah.
Is it a descendant of the Samagana or the Dhruva songs that you mentioned earlier? Where does it take its precedence from?
Well, very vaguely, one could say yes. It is a development from that tradition. Because the word Dhruva means something which is fixed, something which is composed. So, where certain words are fixed, that is a literary composition is made available to us. And then, along with those words, notes and beats, swara and tal is also fixed. So you make what now we call a bandish of Drupad, the bandish of Khayal. So it is in that sense that they had the Brij Bhasha Drupad. But this is the old tradition of creating a Dhruva Pada or a Dhruva. And this originates in the Gitakas, the two Gitakas, two categories of Gitakas, which I described, Rovindak, Madrak, etc., right from the ancient times, which was sung at the time of Vedic Yajna and which have a very old heritage.
It was a beautiful exposition of a completely new subject for me. So now, can we then assume that Natya Shastra preceded Murti Puja? Could it be something like that?
Certainly. Natya Shastra is older than Ramayana. Natya Shastra is older than Mahabharata. I have written extensively on it because the text of Ramayana and Mahabharata, they all borrow technical terms which are from Natya Shastra. Now it cannot be the other way around. No Shastra is going to borrow technical terms from a Kavya or from a Itihas or Puran. The poets don't invent musical terms like Marg or Asarita or Dhruva or Shamya, Tantri, Murchana. These are very technical words, and you find them in both Ramayana and Mahabharata. So if you find these technical terms in Ramayana and Mahabharata, then obviously Ramayana and Mahabharata have taken these technical terms from a particular work on theatre and music, which is none other than Natya Shastra, which may not be exactly the present day Natya Shastra, but a precursor of the present day Natya Shastra, which in our tradition is acknowledged that before this present day Natya Shastra of Bharat Muni, there was a Natya Shastra of Vriddha Bharat, Elder Bharat, Dada Bharat. So tradition knows that. So I have argued, I have a book called Dramatic Concepts Greek and Indian. You can get it on from Amazon. In this, I have given detailed explanations about how Natya Shastra is much older than Ramayana and Mahabharata. The scholars, have not delved into. They have just followed some Western scholars who presume that theatre cannot be before Greek emergence of 5th century BC. So, because the Westerners were writing all the time that theatre came into existence in Greece, so it came into existence in India after the Greeks. So we carry on that kind of a argument in the back of the mind, and great scholars like Raghavan and Kapila Vatsyayan, they have all placed Natya Shastra in 2nd century AD, after the arrival of Alexander in India, which is not true, which is not right.
Thank
I
you.
have a question, Dr. Gupta.
Madam.
I have heard that swaras have are correspondent to our chakras. They have some correlation, and so does the form of the deity, and thus they can be used for healing.
Yes, this is a science which developed at a later stage. This is not the Natya Shastra doesn't look into it because it's a very technical scientific work. But when you develop it science in one area, that is the science of music, then you combine it with the science of another area, which is the Yoga Shastra of the Ashta Chakra. The various kinds of chakra from Swadhisthana, Manipura, Anahat, etc., and see a correlation. So when people started combining one science along with another, then this developed. So these are interdisciplinary developments, which are good, which have to be tried, which have to be seen.
Where this question arose from was from the Gayatri Ashram in Haridwar, which gives an entire diagram of a human form and all the chakras. And it says that when you chant the Gayatri mantra, how various chakras are affected with various swaras.
Yeah, this is true, but you see, there are complications about this. Now people have started singing the mantras in modern ragas. In ancient times, this was not allowed. In ancient times, those who sung the Vedic mantras, they did it only either like Pavakana Saraswati in 3 swaras, or in Samgan 7 swaras, but they did not sing it in local tunes. You see, like Tatsavitu. Now, this was not permitted, and I think this is a very unhealthy development. We can use music to cure ourselves, to do whatever, but we should not mix it with singing of mantras. Mantras have only to be chanted either according to the tradition of Rigved, Samved, Yajurved, Atharvaved, either according to that particular system. They have to be chanted or sung according to Samved, nothing else, not according to modern ragas. This is a very serious problem, and I think great musicians have fallen into this trap. Singing of mantras was forbidden so that the purity and the effect and the sanctity of Vedic Swara Prayoga and Vedic Samgan is preserved as separate. The two are not mixed.
If you could please demonstrate the difference between Dhruva Gan and a Samgan.
The Dhruva, the ancient Dhruva Gans, they were not sung in the Vedic system. The singing of the ancient Dhruvas was in the local tunes. Whatever were the local tunes of that time. The music that prevailed 5,000 years ago at the time of Vedic yajnas being performed. Whatever was the Laukik music or the worldly music or the music of common people, the Dhruvas were sung in that music. They were not sung in Samgan, or they were not sung in the 3 Udatta Anudatta Swarit. You see, that is why the singing of the Dhruva or the Gitakas was different from the chanting of the mantras. So the Vedic yajna was done according to the system of Vedic yajna by the priests, Brahma and Agnihotra and others. They were done by them. And the chanting was done according to the prescriptions, including the Samagan. Like Samgan or the 3 tones. This was done only for the purpose of yajna. But when yajna stopped and in between, the Dhruvas were sung and the dancing was done and veenas were played and music was performed, then that was performed in the contemporary music. Now,
That is quite clear.
I cannot recreate the Dhruva Gan of 5,000 years ago because it has not been preserved. The Samgan has been preserved. The Rig part has been preserved. That is something, that's a great miracle that India performed, that it preserved it exactly as it is. And that is why they said that others should not mix this with their local music. And now in India, we don't understand this distinction. That's why we are mixing, singing Gayatri, which is a mantra. So Gayatri has to be performed and sung only in 3 tones or in Samgan. It is not to be sung in film tunes or folk tunes or even ragas. But now people sing Gayatri in Yaman Kalyan and Bageshwari and this and that, which is wrong.
So, thoda sa deviation hai, and I'm guessing Anand Roy ji wanted to ask some more questions, but a little deviation perhaps. But Natya Shastra, was it ever accessible in the Varna system? Who had access to this? Was it the Brahmin Samaj, or this is that a valid question at all?
I'll tell you a I'll tell you a it is a joke as well as a historical small little thing. Many years ago, I think about 10 years ago, our great South Indian politician Karunanidhi, he gave a statement that Natya Shastra was Brahminical. So I publicly wrote to him and asked him a question through Hindu that does he have any proof that Bharat Muni, who is supposed to have composed Natya Shastra, does he have any proof that Bharat Muni was a Brahmin? Because he is called a Muni, and a Muni can be a Brahmin or a non-Brahmin or whatever, a Rishi. Okay. Secondly, Bharat Muni is closely associated with performers. And he names his 100 sons. Sons means here disciples, who were all performers. And most of these performers, tradition says, belong to Shudra Varna. So why should I not presume that Bharat Muni was a Shudra? That he was a learned Shudra? That he was an actual performer also? That he studied the subject? That he studied and he knew Sanskrit also? And therefore he composed let us call it a manual or a Shastra for preservation of that art which was being performed by him and his disciples, who could have been of different castes. So there is no reason to presume that Bharat Muni was a Brahmin. Absolutely not. Now, another example. There is another great text in the field of performing art, and it was composed by Matanga Muni. The text is called Brihaddeshi. Now, this word Matanga, more often than not, always denotes a Shudra Varna in Indian texts. Matangas are either people living in forests, they are Varna Bahya, they are by our modern standards, what should we call the oppressed classes, etc. So Matanga Muni was certainly not a Brahmin, he was a Shudra. If you take the word Matang as it has its connotation in all other literary texts of India. So here again you have another example. Now this whole thing that various texts were composed by Brahmins only is not true. Manusmriti was composed, let us say, by Manu, but Manu was a Raja, king, a Kshatriya. He was not a Brahmin. Now Yagyavalkya was again a Muni. So we don't know if he was a Brahmin. I mean, we forget a very simple fact that once you become a Muni or a Rishi or a Sannyasi, then from whatever caste you come, that has no meaning or connection. It is a category of a person who has achieved a certain intellectual status, intellectual and spiritual status. Rishi and Muni, and there are various categories of Rishi and Munis, Devarshi and Brahmarshi and this and that, which are not according to Varna or caste, but which are according to spiritual or academic upliftment.
Sir, I would like to know the difference between the Greek iconic worship and Indian idol worship, and there's a connotation of a personal god in Christianity also. So how does that differ from what we believe as a Sagun worship?
No, Christianity is different from the Greeks, please. Let us be very clear about this. The Christians destroyed the Greek gods and goddesses and the temples and the whole culture. The Christians were against Zeus and Apollon and all other gods, Athena they destroyed their temples. They thought that was wrong. It was a house of devil. So please don't associate the Greek Olympic world or the even more ancient world of Titans or Titans Greek world with the Christian world. Now, coming to your question, because Murti Puja was done by the Greeks, and we have most ancient temples in Greece, much more ancient than even in India. Now, Murti Puja was part of the Greek system, and it was coexisting with their system of sacrifice. Now, the Greek system of sacrifice had an exact parallel with the Hindu or the Sanatan system of sacrifice also. It was believed both by the Yajna Kartas in India that the gods, the Devatas, they live in the skies, Divi. That is why they are Devatas. They live in the, similarly the Greeks believed that the gods lived in the skies. And sacrifice had to be presented to them in the skies. They will not come down to take the sacrifice, but the sacrifice has to travel to them. So in both the cultures, it was through fire, Agni, that the sacrifice was made to reach the gods. So the Greeks also gave their offering into the fire, and the smoke of the fire took the sacrifice to the gods. To whichever god you made the sacrifice, whether you made it to Zeus or to Apollo or the goddess Hera or the goddess Athena or Demetra, but it was given through fire. Fire was the messenger in Greece. And similarly, in the Vedic Yajna in India, it was in the Vedic altar that you put the whatever you had to send to the gods, whether it was Somalata, whether it was ghee, whether it was some kind of an animal, whatever. So it was through. Now in Greece also, both the systems emerged somehow, somewhere. In the Greek temples, when regular temple worship started, then sacrifices were made to the gods, not inside the temple, but at the doorstep of the temple. It is there that the animal was put into fire and the smoke took it to the gods. So there are great parallels, and there are various theories about it. Some people even think that Greeks originally migrated from the Sindhu Valley to what is now called Greeks. You see, there are certain references in Bodhain Shraut Sutra about it, that Amavasu, he went west, and he went as far as Aratta, beyond Paras, beyond Persia. So beyond Persia, you have Greece. So that is one reference we have. And then we have all these similarities. So I think as research and archaeological evidence would emerge more and more, we will be able to see these connections. But there is a great parallel between emergence of Murti Puja in Greece and emergence of Murti Puja in India.
I have another question, Bharat sir. The eroticism in Indian temples, depicted in Indian temples.
Yeah.
I recently read that Nehru in Discovery of India wrote that he was abhorred by the images on Khajuraho. I was literally shocked on reading that this is the opinion of the first Prime Minister. But there is a whole lot of
Just ask you
sorry.
for my clarification. Nehru's was appalled or Gandhi was appalled? Or both were appalled?
I read Nehru wrote that.
And Nehru wrote what, please? Could you repeat?
That he was abhorred, imagining or seeing the images of erotic sculptures outside temples.
Ga-
Khajuraho.
Even Nehru was appalled. Not only Gandhi. We have heard about Gandhi, that Gandhi was appalled, but even Nehru. Well, I'm not surprised, and I'm very happy that you have given me this information. Of course, I had known that Gandhi was appalled, but even Nehru. So that goes on to prove my point that since 19th century, Christianity made horrible inroads into the Hindu mind, and it created so many distortions. And one of the distortions that it created, one of the most serious distortions that it created, was that it made us feel guilty about sexuality, just as it made Christians feel guilty about sexuality. You know, right in the first chapter of the Bible, you have this castigation of sexuality as fall. That is, when Adam and Eve ate the apple against the against the injunction of God that they should not eat that forbidden fruit. So as soon as they ate the forbidden fruit, they felt a great deep sexual desire and they indulged in intercourse, and that was the first sin. So this approach to sexuality as sin has been part of the Christian tradition right from the beginning. In fact, Judaic tradition, but it was promoted by Christians and brought to India. And it is ever since that the Anglophonic classes in India and the classes who from India went then to England for their education, like Gandhi and Nehru. So they all came back with this kind of a syndrome, Victorian syndrome. So I'm not surprised if these people were appalled. I'm sure Lokman Tilak would not have been appalled had he gone to Khajuraho. And anybody who had read the Kama Shastra would not have been appalled. It's only those people who did not read our texts who would get appalled. Otherwise, Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha, they are the four Purusharthas or the objectives of human life, aims of human life. And sexuality is one of the aims. It is something absolutely natural. And it is something to be enjoyed as well. It has the function of procreation, which is essential for preserving the human race and for flowering of the human race. And procreating is essential so that you can be free of your debt to gods and to your parents and gurus, so that you can create good citizens and dharmic people. And at the same time, this procreation is enjoyable because it is karma. So it is not something which the Victorians thought of. And Gandhi and Nehru were certainly very Victorian people. And I think a lot of present day Hindus have to resolve this problem. Unfortunately, this kind of got assimilated into India in the 19th century. Dayanand Saraswati was a victim of this syndrome as well. So he forbade that students should not read Kalidas, because Kalidas has described the Shringara Leela, of Shiva and Parvati. And Arya Samajis constantly denounce Natya Shastra, theatre, drama, Puranas, stories. You see, they constantly denounce them as perversions or as things which were developed as a distortion of the true message of the Vedas. And they even reduced all the Vedic gods to a Christian kind of an image. When Dayanand Saraswati translated the Vedas, then into Hindi, he would translate Indra as Parampita Parameshwar. He would translate every god, Saraswati as Parampita Parameshwar or light or this or that. So the whole image, the shape, the body was taken away. And Parampita Parameshwar was brought in. Now, you know, Parampita Parameshwar is a Christian concept. The God in heaven, Patera, the Father, Patera, that is a Christian concept. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, these are all Christian concepts, and they were all merged into one by Dayanand Saraswati as the Vedic, ultimate Vedic God. So I think these were the great inroads of Christianity which came in and which continue in India today. That is why we are not able to take the whole subject of sexuality in a normal manner. India neither believes in sexual liberty, it neither believes in permissiveness, which is transgressing social norms, orders. It neither believes in suppression or guilt. It believes a proper enjoyment of sexuality. And I think we have to come back to that balance through a study of our Shastras, through the study of our literature. You see, our Kavyas, our Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, and all the complicated ideas that are there in it. And it is here that a lot of ancient Greek stories would help us also, because they talk about the power of creativeness and procreativeness in the same Indo-European manner as our texts do. So these are deep philosophical subjects which we have to explore now.
I have a question which is related to both the things that you said. One was about the Victorian values coming into our art and culture. I believe also literature you spoke about. I have observed this in literature for a very long time, because when I read the Latin American poets, it was so refreshing to read their poetry, because that is completely unaffected by the Victorian values.
Yeah.
And our Indian literature, अभी देखा जाए तो 19th century के बाद से कुछ भी ऐसा wholesome नहीं आया है. Either it is too emotional, or it is too social, or it is too pragmatic. There is nothing which is kind of integral in nature, where a person uses the intellect as well as the heart. I mean, I don't know how to put it, but we have also been so that I feel we have been fragmented. We have been, कुछ हिस्सा है हम अपना बड़ा essential जो हमने काट के अलग कर दिया है. मुझे ऐसा लगता है. Could you say something more about this?
Yeah, you are right. You see, the British tradition, don't forget that the Anglican Church was heavily Protestant. And the Protestants, in opposing the Catholics, also opposed a lot of the pre-Christian heritage which the Catholics had. In other words, the whole idea of romance, worship of woman as the paragon of beauty. So if you read medieval Italian poetry, then you have the great poet Dante, who worships Beatrice. Now, that tradition is actually a kind of a Christian mysticism that comes from pre-Christian times, but which was preserved in the Mediterranean. Catholic had some idea of it, and some arms of Catholicism, or let us say some sampradayas or of Catholics, they preserved it. Although, on the whole, Christianity thought of sexuality as sin, but they thought that if you Platonize it, if you elevate it, then it becomes acceptable. But that was missing in the Anglican British tradition. That's why in English poetry you don't have those things, or even in American poetry you don't have. So you have people like T.S. Eliot who become very holy, or who become only spiritual, even though they may go to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, but they would never go to Kam Shastra. So that is the problem. Whereas the Latin tradition, they inherited the whole Catholic heritage. They inherited that feeling. And romanticism, which was not ethereal romanticism, but which was very fleshy romanticism. And therefore your experience with the Latin poets.
I'd like to ask a few more questions.
Yes.
I read this interesting book. I have it in my shelf by Francois Goethe. He had mentioned that Arya Samaj, like you said, sir, how it basically, Dayananda Saraswati basically translated that all father Christian God as to our own thing and how it got assimilated. He said that Arya Samaj is basically, I quote, Christianity in Hindu garb. I would like to know your if he's absolutely correct, or if there's anything more, or if there's any role of Christian missionary and underhand in the Arya Samaj. And also, if you can, could you please show a demo of what the Gayatri Mantram would have originally sounded like? Is it totally lost? Or?
Okay, now first about Gayatri, because that is more in connection with my talk. You see, Gayatri is a mantra, and it is also a chanda, or a certain prosodic meter. But the mantras, as I said, they would be either sung in Samagan, the 7-note Samagan, or they would be recited in the 3 tones. You see, the 3 tones of Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarit. So all mantras were recited, or they were done in Samagan, whether it is Gayatri or it is any other mantra. So you can hear recordings of various Samagan or other mantras, and you will get a very good picture. It is not only Gayatri, but all the mantras are recited in these three tones or in Samagan, right? Now, coming to the Arya Samaj thing, I would not go to the extent to saying that it was a Christian plot or something like that. I have great respect for Swami Dayananda Saraswati. He was a great nationalist. He was a great reformer. He was a Hindu par excellence, and he was somebody who wanted to confront and oppose totally the Christian missionaries, and he wanted India to be rid of all kinds of deceit and all kind of chicanery and various other social evils and lack of education of women. So he did sterling work for it, and he is one of the great heroes of 19th century. In fact, he is the first nationalist who wanted India to be independent. However, he thought, for whatever reasons, that worship of icon is not correct. And so he said that Vedic yajna must be revised. And he revived that. In order to revive that and make it accessible to people, he also broke down the restrictions of reciting mantras according to tradition, according to a special education. At the same time, he also rejected the idea of doing yajna in the very old elaborate way. He said a simple yajna can be done by an individual. Now, yajnas were done in simply in the Vedic time also, because just as you do your normal puja today, similarly, your daily yajna was done by the individual grihastha, by the fire which he had in his own home. So he wanted to revive that. He revived that, and he did sterling work in it. And he thought that a lot of things which were being sold in the name of Hinduism, and particularly in the name of visiting the temples and restrictions on various activities of the people regarding temple entry, etc., were wrong. And so he was a great reformer, and he propounded a return to the simple Vedic yajna. You see, this is what he simplified it. He simplified it to such an extent that a lot of things became, in his eyes, wrong. So, development of Murti Puja, development of the temple, the economy of the temple, the culture of the temples, the social life of the temples, the arts in the temples, temples as a repository of great scholars and artists, and temples as nodal centers which distributed learning to rest of the people, to the rest of the city. All this he overlooked. So he was a missionary. He was reviving something good, but he neglected a huge amount of later development of Hinduism. So present day Hinduism cannot survive without temple worship. And unfortunately, the present day Arya Samajis have become very fanatic. They insist that the Vedas are word of God, just as Bible is the word of God, or just as Quran is the word of God. Now, they make this mistake because our tradition does call the Vedas as apaurushaya. That is, that they are not created by a human being. But it is also the Indian belief that whatever is created by a poet, whether it is a work of art or work of sculpture or a painting, is all done as part of a divine blessing. It is Vidya or Saraswati. It is divine, which is visiting you and making you do it. So Vedas are apaurushaya in the sense that there is a divine inspiration to the rishi who speaks out the mantra. But the mantras have been spoken by the rishis. So there is nothing so different about Vedas or Vedic mantras from the utterances of Kalidas or utterances of Valmiki or utterances of other poets, because all that is a divine visitation. All that is apaurushaya. And Arya Samajis should not go on insisting that Vedas alone are apaurushaya, Vedas alone are praman, Vedas alone are to be followed, nothing else is to be followed. I think this is where they tend to be divisive. And this is where they tend to copy Christians and Muslims. And in this respect, to my mind, they make a mistake. They become exclusivist. So the Hindu tradition is not exclusivist, it is an inclusive tradition.
The parallels between Greek and Indian culture, I find that very interesting myself, because even I love Greek mythology. And okay,
Yes.
I'm not sure if mythology is the correct word, but
Yes,
uh,
ancient Greece is a matter of great attraction to Indians and Hindus, Hindus in particular, modern Indians and modern Hindus, because they are both Indo-European culture. They are both cultures which have immense parallels, and there are several values which are almost identical or very similar. Now, if you want a more detailed understanding of this, then you can read my book, Dramatic Concepts, Greek and Indian. You can see some of my videos on my channel, YouTube channel. I have several videos there on this subject. And then you will get a detailed account that there were several values which were uh, identical, common, like the idea of pure and impure, shuchi and ashaucha. Something pure is something which has power and potency, and something which is impure travels towards death. So, this whole concept of dividing purity and impurity. So, your money can be impure, your money can be pure, your mind can be pure, and mind can. So, this whole concept dividing things between pure and impure, shauch and ashaucha, and the Greek word for that is miasma and catharsis. They have exact words for this. And the exact miasma means impurity, catharsis means cleaned, pure. So they divide the world into this. Then there are many other parallels like what we have, Atithi Devo Bhava, then they have the concept of Xenia, and they have several other things, power of word, like power of word or orchos. And so if you read my book, you will see a large number of parallels which ancient Greeks, Homeric Greeks, and even 5th century Greeks had in their lives. The present day Greece is a very different world. It's a mixture of some little bit of ancient world and modern Christianity, but they still preserve a lot of their ancient values, I think. And that is why uh, Indians normally like Greek culture immensely.
I just wanted to add on one point, sir. I'm sorry for taking your time. About the Greek and Indian parallel you said, about the worship of feminine as well, I would like to add. And like you said, there is a small movement in Greece, sir, where they're trying to revive their old Hellenic culture. They call it Hellenism. And they too are fighting for the ownership of their Athena Parthenos, just like how we fought for Ram Mandir. I thought it was an interesting similarity which I didn't want to
Yes,
share.
it is true. You see, 100 years ago, uh, in the 19th century, there used to be a church uh, on the top and a church in the precincts of the temple of Athena. So that was removed without any opposition, or although Greece is a Christian nation, but they removed the church. And wherever they want to restore their ancient temples, there is no debate in public that a church should be removed. Because just as Babar desecrated the Ram Mandir and made a mosque, similarly, in the 3rd century, the Greeks, when they were invaded by Christians, the mainland Greeks were invaded by Eastern Christians from what is now Turkey. Then they destroyed a lot of ancient temples and they made churches over them, or they engraved crosses on them. If you visit the museums, there it's all very obvious and clear. But in Greece, there is no debate about this. In Greece, they want to clear all that and restore their ancient temples. They have been doing it for 100 years. It's only in India, because Nehru's perverted policy of secularism, that we have this problem. That hundreds and hundreds of Hindu temples which were occupied by Islamic invaders and converted into mosque, they are not being restored to their originals. But the Greeks don't have that problem at all. It's basically a problem between Islam and other ways of thinking. It is not a problem with the Christian Greeks. The Christian Greeks are very proud of their pre-Christian past, and they don't want to suppress it. They consider that as their heritage. Whereas if you go to Turkey, which is now Muslim, they do not consider their ancient Greek past as their past. They consider that as something to be forgotten. So this is a big difference of mentality and perception.